said, so anyhow, like that. So we have a first and a second, so all those in favor say aye.
She pulled the vote because it's on my hands.
Sorry, thank you.
Supervisor Chapman?
And no.
Supervisor Alba?
Yes.
Supervisor Pyle?
Aye.
Supervisor Hammond?
Aye.
Supervisor Lassen?
Aye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item H3.
Okay, as we discussed last week with three of you, the board budgeted funds in last year's general fund for economic development efforts, and it's been a topic of debate at several LEDC meetings, Lassen Economic Development Council meetings, and with myself among staff as far as how to implement that direction. And the recommendation is to, in both items H3 and 4, go hand in hand in terms of that, the appropriation of that money and the expenditure of that money. The first item is to deal with the what's termed a splash page, which would be a web page that would link other local pages to this splash page, and the splash page would be more easily searchable on the internet, web search engines, and so forth, and therefore hopefully be kind of a clearinghouse for interests that tourists might have for the area. We expect that cost to be about $8,000, which would be under my authority, and as far as the contracting part is, we're just asking for approval of that. Then the next item out of the questions we had last week were related to the fund and budget unit line item of the appropriation. It is indeed in the general fund, non-departmental budget unit, the 0101 budget unit, and that's where it's budgeted under a line item titled Economic Development Effort. There's $100,000 budgeted there. Same issues with the Public Works item, although we envision completing that part of the project through the Public Works Department, which would be the installation of 2 restrooms on the Susanville Ranch Park, 2 24-hour, 365-day-a-year restrooms, one at the main parking lot and one higher at the
equestrian parking.
Yes, and the funds were budgeted this year. We'll do everything we can to get it done this year, although depending on the availability of those restrooms and so forth, that may get pushed over into the first part of the next fiscal year. Any questions? I'd be happy to try to address them.
Okay. Any questions?
Excuse me.
Any questions, board members? Okay, so we'll go to the public, and we have a card from Eileen Spencer to talk on this matter.
Have you combined 2 agenda items?
Excuse me.
I addressed both. I addressed 2 agenda items.
Yeah. You wanted to talk on H3?
Well, I want to talk on both, but...
We were on H3. If you'd like to talk on H3, we're going to take up H4 separate.
Oh, okay. The budget in Fund 100, you have, I think it's under 2,300 you're talking about.
The line item?
The line item is 2,300.
23 or 28.
28.
If there's a line item that's called the economic development effort, and there's a $100,000 appropriation.
This again, it's confusing to the public and possibly to the board that in 2,300 in Fund 100 there is a line item website, but you've not budgeted anything this year on it. That's on 2,300. And then you have an economic development effort. You have $100,000 So when you stick in website, I'm assuming that if you're gonna do a website expenditure, that it would be budgeted in website. It doesn't appear anywhere else on Fund 100. Website doesn't appear anywhere else, except under 2300, and you didn't budget anything for this expense. So as I told you last time, is that we're going to question every single expenditure that is not clear. If you don't have the fund, we're going to question it. If you don't have the balance, we're going to question it. And this item, are you on that, would you have that page? Okay, I didn't, let me just hand, I made copies. But the board makes these decisions on spending $8, $10, $100,000, and I think it's done under trust, because certainly I don't think I'm not getting the impression you were aware that nothing was budgeted, could have been, but wasn't budgeted under website. It's under 2300 on the first page. So maybe during the next budget process, we can clean that sort of stuff up, because we're looking, can we help us looking at every penny that you spend? And we'll continue to do that, and these are things that can be tidied up during the next budget process. But right now, you didn't budget anything. You want to spend $8,000, but you didn't budget anything for it. So it can't be done willy-nilly like this. Willy-nilly. Willy-nilly? that word. Money is precise, especially public money is very precise, and just this board needs to be probably asking the same questions Can We Help is asking. You know, why isn't there any money budgeted for websites for this fiscal year? Just to pick something off this sheet, just go down and pick a line item. You can't do that. You just can't. That's what this budget is for. So, I don't know what the answer is to this. Move money, or, you know, we seem to be having this chronic problem of just picking an expenditure and not, there doesn't seem to be any plan for it. So when somebody says it's a budgeted item, it needs to, the public needs to see it, I need to see it, you need to see it in particular. And again, it's just another one of those things where we're gonna call you out on every penny until the process gets a little more refined, and we don't have to come up and ask why you're spending $8,000 on a website and you didn't budget for it.
Thank you. Is there, excuse me, anyone else that would like to comment on this? You know, from my perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, we, as the staff report says, we did allocate $100,000 to assist with the comprehensive economic development strategy, and for a period of time I did sit on that committee. I remember did some of the exercises that we did do on needs of the community that, you know, are part of the staff report. So I'm of the opinion that the $8,000 expenditure, I mean, although it, you know, there's a, you know, a gazillion things if you want to itemize, you know, every last possibility, but it was generalized to some extent. But there's no denying the fact that to create this splash page to promote tourism clearly falls in line with assisting the SIDS program, in my opinion. That's one point.
Mr. Chairman, having participated in a fair amount of the effort leading up to the creation of the SIDS report, and in the SIDS report it does identify, it's a document that was adopted by this board. It was completed after several months of hands-on involvement with the community, And we have the private sector group working with the chamber, with the public agencies that kind of outlined $100,000 was to begin the process of implementing that particular strategy. It's not tied to some other line item in the book, so this other line item dealing with website, that probably had to do at one time with the website of the county, which is totally separate from what the SIDS report is focusing on. And so in the outline of available things to be done, given the fact we only have basically 6 weeks left in the current fiscal year, so we haven't seen a lot of the projected activities that was in that first round that Mr. Nichols brought to the board after the SIDS committee had met and kind of finalized its recommendation. They've met recently and have revised that recommendation and see that the best utilization of these funds would be to not only invest in those restroom facilities that we need for Susan Ranch Park. You bring a lot of people here, but we don't provide restroom facilities is a major problem. And the other issue is the creation of this splash thing where we could take all the websites that are out there that function in relationship to promoting recreation, not only with the ranch park, but throughout the county. And that was where the $8,000 cost was coming, to be handled by county staff. Joel is very much put in the position of putting this all together. So I think it is part of the $100,000 recommendation that was funded by the board last year when they put the $100,000. So this other distraction of trying to say, well, it's not in this line here, that line over there, that $100,000 is a budget unit unto itself. It's not part of the breakdown, and that information has been vetted through the working group that's been behind this, and I think the board should accommodate. And I would move that we direct staff to proceed with the utilization of $8,000 out of the $100,000 appropriation for the implementation of the splash page, so we can begin moving forward with that SIDS document was all about.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so it's been moved. Do we have a second, and then we can carry on the discussion? Okay. So, carrying on with the discussion. Does any other board members like to comment before we take action?
Well, I suggested to Richard, and I think he took a step in maybe clarifying some of this stuff by putting the line items and the funds in these requests for money. And we should be better about it, and I think we're going to make an effort to be better about it. But I do support this expenditure of $8,000, and obviously I think we're headed in the right direction. So,
any other comment? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. All right, thank you. Okay, move on to H4, Public Works Project. Richard, would you like to?
Sure. Very similar issues to H3, same fund, same budget unit, same line item, same philosophy in terms of implementation of the SEDS plan. The only difference between this item, or two different between this item and the last items, we plan on having Public Works handle this project because it is more like a public work, and it may go into next fiscal year in terms of actually paying for it if we're not able to do that.
Well, the $100,000 that was budgeted this year that are unspent, the portion that's unspent will roll into next year's budget anyway. So it's that's just the reality.
I would just like to state that I think it's, if not unanimous, it's almost unanimous that the restrooms at the park are a big issue and should be addressed.
I would move, Mr. Chairman, so we have the discussion, that we would authorize the Public Works Department to proceed with the bidding process for the purchase and installation of restroom facilities for Seasonal Ranch Park as part of implementing the SIDS plan.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Before we take any action, I'd like to, is there any public comment on this? Eileen?
Some things that are said here draw additional concern. Like when you're doing the budget, the money just rolls over. Like you're trying to tell the public that we do this blindly, that SIDS money or the economic just roll, it doesn't roll over. You have to decide whether you're gonna double it, cut it in half. That's part of the budget process. For somebody to say that it's just gonna roll over, maybe has been here too long. The second, well, the main question I had is we're gonna start asking for balances in these funds. And you have to not take this that we're against toilets or we're against a website, but we're gonna make you accountable, and we wanna know where our money's going, so we are gonna make you accountable, and we will be bringing up these budget items as you spend every dollar. So I'd like to know the balance of that $100,000 right now, today.
Well, the $100,000 is an appropriation in the budget, which is different from a balance. It is appropriated within the non-departmental budget unit of the general fund, so.
I realize that, but you're not gonna, because there's $100,000 on that line item, you don't have authority to spend $500,000 on that line item.
Correct.
So you do have a depreciating balance
A
there.
remaining appropriation.
Exactly. So I'm just going to ask again, how much have you spent of that $100,000, and do you have any money to spend on these toilets?
Yes, I don't have the exact figures. There was 100,000 appropriated.
Is Karen here?
She's not. A few $1,000s have been spent in supplementing the salary of the trails coordinator, and that's all that's been spent out of that
Okay.
appropriation.
So when I put in a public records request for the balance of this fund, there should be 80,000.
Well, again, it's not a fund.
I mean, there should be, on that line item, you should have only spent, it should only show that you spent a couple of $1,000.
It'll show what has been spent out of the appropriation, yes.
Because I think that would probably be a good idea for you to bring in, for me to get, so I can avoid questioning you. Because if you have the money and you've appropriated it, then there's no problem. It's the fact that you asked the board to approve these expenditures, and not one of them knows how much is in that.
They're getting fund balance reports monthly, as well as the availability of, at any point in time.
So if I ask Tom Hammond right now, how much is left in that?
I
You
doubt
know?
out of all the appropriations, although I know Tom's a really smart guy, but I doubt that he's got them all in his memory.
I don't know.
He's pretty close to correct on that.
Well, if I could address that issue, because I
Thank you.
think it is a good question, and I can address it since I have been attending the meetings of the SIDS committee. And as of the 1st of May, I don't believe there's been a dollar spent of the $100,000. There has, because now the trails coordinator position, which has been a partially funded position, is now going to be coming back, thanks to the board direction earlier in May, to be more like a full-time position and utilizing Mr. Rasty in a more part-time capacity. It's, you know, they haven't processed, to my knowledge, the paperwork, but the funding to offset that extra cost for the balance of this fiscal year, which could range, you know, $5,000, $8,000. It's under probably $10,000 is the only thing that has been indicated to me as being utilized out of this $100,000 appropriation. Then the issue came up with the splash funding, and that's where the $8,000. And what was projected to the committee is that these restrooms, we don't know till we go through the bidding and do that, but it would be in the neighborhood of around $40,000. And then on top of that, in the SIDS proposal, at least the funding, there was some funds set aside to work with the consultant out of Chico, Audrey from Chapin and Associates and her firm, that put together the SIDS program and did all the work with staff 2 years ago, bringing her back in to kind of jumpstart and make sure that we're staying on track. And I think Marty had indicated using her efforts up to about $20,000. Well, obviously she hasn't been engaged with that for the last 10 months, but she did attend the meeting, was there, so I'm sure there was probably a small fee, probably in the neighborhood of a couple $1,000 involving her for the balance of this year. So we're going to be well underspending with the $100,000 that's set aside. And that's what we're talking about, is those funds basically roll back over into the budget, have to be reappropriated in the next budget to be utilized if they're gonna continue the particular effort of that program. But in the meantime, if we encumber, and we're looking at encumbering either with the restroom project or with the balance of utilizing Joel's time, that a portion of this 100,000 would be expended or committed during this fiscal year. But as of the 1st of May, the information that I had based on the reports from the auditor's office and what was shared at the meeting is that we have spent none of this $100,000 to this point.
Okay, are you saying, Mr. Chapman, that this line item economic development effort is earmarked only for SIDS?
Yes, that was what was put into the budget last September when it was at the end. Mr. Nichols wanted to have that SIDS initiative that he had outlined in several memos dating back to the spring of 2013. And the board agreed to include that as an appropriation item for the implementation of that. And it's all outlined in Marty's memos. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly $1 for this and $1, but he had a tentative budget lined up of how he wanted to use this $100,000. You know, with his departure in December, because he hadn't done anything with that from September to December, obviously meant none of that was accomplished in the last 10 months. And so as a result, we're here winding up the fiscal year, and the SIDS committee said, you know, at least we could do this to utilize a portion of those monies, knowing full well that the balance would then roll over into the general fund to be reappropriated, hopefully in the next fiscal year. There's no guarantee they're going to get those monies or any additional monies, but they will definitely be at the table asking for some funding, because the rest of that SIDS program, you know, needs to be pursued, and that was the commitment the board made 18 months ago when we adopted it.
Okay, we're gonna move along.
I'm gonna say one more thing, that this appears to be a junkyard fund because of what you have in here, so we're gonna watch this really close.
Thank you very much for your efforts in watching this year. Okay, anyone else? Go ahead.
Richard, on these restrooms, okay, they're up there, and I don't know, Jim rides his bike up there, and he just uses the restroom, and he discovers that they're full and overflowing. I mean, is it gonna be real easy, or are they gonna have to put out a bid to have those go pumped and cleaned, or?
Maintain, that's part of it.
Yeah, Public Works will be designing a maintenance plan as far as.
And that would be
So if there's an issue, they can go up there and just pump it out, be done with it, not
That-
like a bid or anything?
Yeah, that would be,
Right.
that would be part of the ongoing budget that they would be bringing in.
We'll put out a 90-day RFP.
I would, it seems like there's an issue of control over the budget. I would just mention that when an officer of the county, in this case it would be me, executes a claim for payment or a contract for services, and which would probably be these two cases, that officer is charged with checking the budget to make sure that there is not only the appropriation in place, but also the funds in the treasury. That's the first level of check, and you know, and I, as an officer, would sign for that claim, transmit it to the auditor, who would again check and make sure that the proper fund, budget unit, and line item has the appropriation available and the cash. And so those are the checks that are in place, and they vary slightly depending on whether it's a purchase order, a contract, or a straight claim, but they all have the same effect.
It might be helpful, though, to have the unused balance on these, because it'd be nice when you're making a decision, and you know if you're down to your last, $100, and do we want to spend it on this, or especially if it's early on in the year. It'd be just kind of a nice piece of information.
Well, as of the 1st of May,
Right, no, I realize,
the
yeah.
full 100,000 was
Exactly,
sitting there,
yeah.
because they still had not processed any paperwork, to my knowledge,
Yeah.
for Joel's time
Right.
being charged back to it, but that was part of the intent.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. We got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, let's take up item H5.
Right, so last week, Mr. Chairman, we discussed the potential need for airport land use plan, the Amity Airfield. Airport land use plan is required by the code of the Airport Land Use Commission for all public airways, and in this case, their interpretation, or the interpretation of California Department of Transportation is that the Amity Field would qualify and therefore need a plan. So the discussion revolved around, do we do that plan immediately, which we estimate would take approximately 4 months. If we did the environmental and contracted out some of the drafting of the plan prior to issuing the request for proposals for disposal of that airfield property, or in the alternative, issue the request for proposals without a plan, which would then, and I'll let Maury address this more, but would then potentially subject the new owners to not knowing what that plan is, and after they own the property, having to go to the Airport Land Use Commission for each proposed action that they want to take out there. There is some debate about whether or not simply the issuing the request for proposals would need to go without a plan, would need to go to the Airport Land Use Commission for their consideration. And out of at least an abundance of caution, that would be my recommendation if we decide not to go forward with the plan immediately. So Maury can expand on that.
I think you covered most of the bases. I contacted a consultant that we work with frequently, and they were willing to entertain the idea of a low-cost plan if we were to, in turn, give them copious amounts of staff time, which I said the board has made clear that if they do go forward with this idea to get the plan done, that we would be willing to go ahead and provide staff time to help complete the plan, but they would basically provide the infrastructure and we would do outreach as well as the environmental. So we think that that could be accomplished probably under $10,000.
$10,000 fee, and how many hours of staff time?
Never done a plan for an airport, so I don't really have a real good feel for that, but
A lot. Doesn't seem to me.
well, it's a very low fee. I think I explained to the board, we contacted, numerous consultants, and it ranged all over the place, but I think they probably were not, they were contemplating more of a higher density kind of a situation, and having multiple outreach to the community, and I see that being more limited in our case. As well as I think the plan could be very simplistic for where it's at and what the densities around there are within 2 miles. So, but it's up to the board. We squeeze on the balloon, it goes up this way. We squeeze, it goes that way. If it's the board's pleasure to get staff on this, we'll just do it, recognizing that other things may have to take a back seat. But as I said, this consultant's working at the scope of work. I expect to see that this week, and we can report back next week if we want to kick the can, see what the scope of work looks like and how many meetings, etc.
I would just add that if we intend this contract to be under $10,000, which would fall under my authority, we don't have a meeting for two weeks, so if it's the direction of the board, we could move forward with that.
Where would that come from in the budget? What budget item?
I'd have to sit down with Richard.
Yeah, we have to identify the source of funding for it.
Thanks. So, I guess we'll have a discussion for that. I would, to me it seems almost, I don't know, counterproductive, or, the plan, 10 grand, okay, but I mean, if you're talking about, 400 hours of staff time, when you wages, we've been told numerous times over the years how stretched you guys are. And now to all of a sudden insert this plan, that isn't really necessary. We wanna, dispose of the property. Why do we wanna spend 10 grand plus $40,000 of staff time? For what? You know, we could, move on with the plan, and, you know, be very clear, it's as is, where it is, and,